Hi, this is your host Kapil Bhartia, and today we have with us Christopher Robinson, aka CRob, Security Lorex at OpenSSF. Christopher, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's my pleasure. And today we are going to talk about the OpenSSF security baseline. Of course, folks know about OpenSSF, but for those who don't know, just quickly tell us what is OpenSSF all about.
The OpenSSF started about 5 years ago in August. This is coming August. And it was a combination of a couple existing security focused consortiums or groups. And we came in under the umbrella of the Linux Foundation. And we're focused exclusively on securing open source software and open source software supply chains and trying to be an advocate for both the upstream maintainers and all the downstream consumers and just try to explain what good security looks like and how it's actually pretty easy to achieve sometimes.
If you look at OpenSSF, is it about developing software? It is about advocacy. It is. So I just want to understand what is the mission, what is the goal of OpenSSF here?
It's actually all those roles plus more. And unlike a lot of Linux Foundation projects where they're focused in on a specific task, so we want to talk about RISC-V hardware, or we want to talk about green energy, so that they're pretty well siloed. But the OpenSSF is one of these horizontal functions that goes across all of the LF's work. And we're focused, again, as we mentioned, on trying to help arm and train developers and maintainers and also provide tooling and signals for consumers. We also do a ton of advocacy for just open source security in general, but we also do a lot of work with helping educate global regulators and public policy folks. We're really heavily involved in things like the EU CRA legislation, where we help provide feedback and ongoing. We're trying to help. We're part of an expert group helping coach them on how to more effectively implement security controls in open source. But then we also do, we do work on trying to help connect projects to contributors. That's a big part of the LF mission, is providing these safe, neutral spaces where developers and community people can come together and collaborate on these really important issues like security or artificial intelligence or cloud native security or confidential compute. A lot of different areas, and we're one of those few horizontal functions across all the projects.
Excellent. Thank you. Now let's talk about the OpenSSF security baseline. What is it?
So the security baseline, we've been playing around with it for about a year. And the idea comes out of enterprise operations and enterprise information security. So if you work in a bank or a big enterprise, it's very typical that you would have a checklist or referred to as a baseline before you can bring a system or a new program online. And it's essentially a checklist where you're going down and these are the requirements that you need to fulfill. So in enterprise operations and enterprise architecture, very common. But with upstream open source, the concept is really alien. So what we're trying to do is we're bringing together a couple of different existing tools, like our best practices badge, scorecards, Salsa, Guac, a lot of these different more technical initiatives. And again, trying to distill those down to their essence and provide an upstream maintainer a checklist. If you follow these 14 things, you're going to improve the security posture of your project. You're substantially potentially going to be able to make your downstreams lives better because now they understand how you do software development, how you manage your infrastructure, how you deploy software. And ultimately, it also helps downstream in understanding. Now, those are the folks that typically have regulatory obligations. So if you work at a bank, you have to talk to the OCC or the Fed or the PCI Council. So this baseline is informed by these global regulations like the CRA, but also cybersecurity frameworks like the Secure Software Development Framework, the cybersecurity framework from NIST, 853, and a whole host of other regulations and cybersecurity frameworks. So again, we distilled this down to make it very simple for a project to be able to pick up and run with, and then for a consumer to understand what the project is doing in these particular security areas.
in past, Linux Foundation had a lot of initiative. CII was one core initiative. They all, I mean, of course, I covered it. They had the badges for projects. Can you talk about the evolution of security within the Linux Foundation and how different is OpenSSF and projects like Baseline from those previous initiative? Is it the evolution? Is it the replacement? Just give us a picture of the evolution of security at Linux Foundation.
It's actually the evolution. So the CII was actually one of those pre-existing foundations that was merged in with and became the OpenSSF. And it used to be called the CII Best Practices Badge, put together by my friend, Dr. David Wheeler. And that actually was transformed into the OpenSSF's Best Practices Badge, which is one of the core pillars of how we assembled our checklist for baseline. And the vision is the baseline would be a set of requirements before someone would go forth and try to get a best practices badge. And we have quite a lot of coverage. So if you do the baseline, you're well on your way to being 70, 80% there to be able to earn that digital best practices badge. But it's been a very much an evolution, just like cybersecurity evolved out of information security, which evolved out of the security department, which oftentimes was a blend of physical and electronic security. And so has the OpenSSF become this evolution where we're kind of the latest incarnation, iterating over these ideas. And within the baseline, none of these ideas are new. If you've been involved in cybersecurity, this is all kind of very classic cybersecurity thing: principle of least privilege, protecting confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So it's all kind of mom and apple pie, bread and butter stuff. So it shouldn't be radically new things within the ecosystem.
When we look at this baseline, who is the target audience here? Is it the developer when they start writing the first line of code, or is it about operators who are deploying the code, or the companies? Also, we can talk about the whole supply chain. You folks also SPDX and whole bill of materials. So I want to understand who are the constituents of this baseline.
So it's actually two of those personas you touched on, and I'll broadly generalize them into: we're focused on upstream and we're focused on downstream. The first stakeholder are those developer maintainers, the upstream. And if we're able to, and there's been a big talk over the decades about shifting security left and starting a project off with these secure style principles. And if we're able to influence upstream and help in the creation of the software before a consumer gets it, we understand that these things are following secure by default, secure by design principles. So ideally, if we get upstream doing that, we can increase the renown of a project. They can show off and say, look how secure we are. I did a good job. I earned a badge or a sticker. And so it kind of helps them, and which will influence downstream. If a project is known to have good security practices and produces things like an SBOM, or they have attestations about saying we have a security policy, or this is our vulnerability disclosure policy, for example, and providing that evidence, that makes it easier for downstream to ingest these amazing pieces of software with confidence, knowing that upstream is following very similar practices that would be in force inside an enterprise. And so ideally, again, I mentioned that we're informed by a library of these frameworks and regulations. And what the selling point for maintainers is if you follow the baseline, we'll show you how you're ticking these things off. And ideally, if you have downstream coming asking you to do certain things, ideally your homework's already done, and you can focus on actually writing features and improving your project, and not worry about compliance and checklists and paperwork, because that work is already done. And downstream can just go to your software repository, your Git repo, and be able to pull an SBOM or look at your security policy and understand what they need to, so that they can do their own due diligence and have conversations with their auditors and regulators.
And what kind of resources are available for either upstream, developers, maintainer, or of course downstream users, so they can get the most out of baseline?
So there's a ton of resources. Well, there are some resources that are available today, and there will be substantially more available in the future. We've spent a lot of work kind of locking in the first version of the checklist, And we're really happy with how this is lined up and the coverage we have on frameworks and regulations. So from that standpoint, uh, the library, the catalog is ready. And now we're focused in on the DevOps piece where we're looking to see how can we automate things. So one of the recommendations is the project should produce an SBOM. Well, we want to provide templates and GitHub actions or GitLab actions, the equivalent in GitLab, to be able to generate an SBOM in either SPDX or Cyclone, whatever works out for your community, or both, depending if you have a downstream that wants both. But we're working now on that tooling phase and automation and also attestation. And that's the critical piece for downstream. It's not as important for upstream. The maintainer really doesn't care as much, but if they're able to have something that's, has a digital signature. So on this day, CRob authored this package and we can prove it hasn't been tampered with. And here's the SIG store, the digital signature information. So you can trace back and show that that hasn't been tampered with. So we're focused in on automation and tooling that will be forthcoming in the next few months, and also those digital attestations. And then finally, we're working with some of the Linux Foundation tools to provide a dashboard so that if it's a Linux Foundation project, they're automatically going to be able to see what part of the baseline they're following. And if you're a downstream consumer, you'll be able to see that information as well. But then also, again, publicly provide that information. So if you have a different tool, if you have you're running your own Guac instance, or you're a bank and you're running Archer or some risk management tool, you should be able to grab those files and pull them into your own information, your own system, and be able to display it in your own dashboard.
We are talking about baseline. One of the hottest topic these days is AI. I mean, AI has been around for a very long time, but because of OpenAI, Gen AI, large language models, it has become a hot topic these days. Talk a bit about how do you folks look at when it comes to security, when it comes to AI, large language models, and this baseline.
So I look at it with two different hats. First off, the OpenSSF, we have an AI ML working group that is focused in specifically around the security of the development practices of these large language models and Gen AI and everything. And they're also focused in on kind of policy style things. But from my perspective, I work a lot with our application security experts in the best practices working group. And from my perspective, while there are some technical interesting things about how you tune a model, or how you work with the infrastructure, at the end of the day, when you're developing something within AI, you're a developer, you're developing. So the classic application security practices generally are all and it should be in place. Software development lifecycle, so your supply chain and dependency management, these are all things that you need to worry about. And there's a lot of carryover from the classic cyber and application security practice. So the AI is a very important topic. Very heavily involved with a lot of the other LF foundations. We participate with DARPA on their AI cyber challenge. So AI is there, and I feel that baseline, again, there maybe need to be some specific adjustment for some of the nuances of all the different hardware components, or like training the models. But at the end of the day, I think that baseline would add a lot of value to development and securing of AI.
Now, since the security baseline is out, what else is in your pipeline? What are the things that you folks are working on?
Right now, we're in the final stages of wrapping up our pilot projects. We've got a 9 combination of OpenSSF, CNCF, the Cloud Native Foundation, and Finos, which is a banking foundation within the Linux group. And so we're getting feedback from those pilot projects, and we'll probably have one more round of slight adjustments where we're gauging. We have the baseline is laid out into 3 levels of maturity, and we think level 1 is the easiest, level 2 is a little harder, and level 3 is something that's like expert mode. And so we're getting that feedback from the actual developers to say, yes, this is easy, or no, that's a little too hard, or boy, wouldn't it be great if we had a tool to help me do this? So we're in that stage of going through that feedback and starting to put into our roadmap of creating automation or making some slight adjustments. But the baseline is publicly available. We'd love for folks to take a look at it. And part of what I add to the baseline is I again come from banking. I'm a governance, risk, and compliance cyber person. So I bring in that kind of framework methodology, and we're going to be adding in additional regulations and additional cyber frameworks. So if the public had something that they really, there would be value if we mapped to PCI DSS or HIPAA or the EU's DORA, for example. I'll be taking those requests and going through and doing the mapping to, again, show the coverage by following these simple practices. You're able to be compliant with these all these different things.
CRob, thank you so much for taking
You're
time out
very
today and
welcome. Very
and
welcome.
talk about security baseline. And I look forward to chatting with you folks again. Because as you said, there's a lot of things in your pipeline. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
I really appreciate you having me on today. Thank you.